I never believed in ghosts, but my mother-in-law's house has certainly made me reconsider my stance on the matter. The house itself is old and dilapidated, and has an eerie feeling to it even in the daylight. But at night, it becomes something else entirely. When my wife and I agreed to move in to take care of her mother, who was recovering from a stroke, we began living at the house. My wife and I had our own room, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me as I slept. I would often wake up in the middle of the night to find the curtains fluttering, even though all the windows were closed. I dismissed it as my imagination and tried to ignore it. One night, as I was getting ready to leave for work, I heard a baby crying. At first, I thought it was coming from inside the house, but as I walked through the living room and towards the garage, I realized it was coming from under my car. I went to check, only to find that there was nothing there. I shrugged it off as my imagination and headed to work, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in my gut. The crying continued to happen every night, and it was always coming from under the car. I decided to ignore it and went on with my day, but it was hard to shake the feeling that something was off. Things took a turn for the worse when I started hearing a baby crying from under the bed when I was trying to sleep. I would lay there wide awake listening to it until it stopped. I would feel like something was watching me, and I would lay in bed, eyes wide open with fear. But when I would get up to investigate, there was never anyone there. My wife would always sleep soundly through it all, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I confided in my mother-in-law about what was happening, but she would always shrug it off and say it was nothing to be concerned about. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, I decided to take a shower to try and clear my head. I turned on the water and stepped into the tub, pulling the curtain closed behind me. As I began to lather up, I thought I saw a movement out of the corner of my eye. I paused, wondering if it was just my imagination, but then I saw it again. It was a shadow, and it was definitely the shape of a baby crawling across the curtain. I froze, unable to move as the shadow moved closer to me. My heart was pounding in my chest and my mind was racing with fear. I thought I saw the shadow reach out to me with tiny hands, but just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. Trembling with fear, I finished my shower and got dressed, unable to shake the image of the shadow baby from my mind. I told my wife about it, but she dismissed it as my imagination. But I knew what I saw, and it was real. That was the moment that I knew that this house was truly haunted and I could never stay there again. But the crying kept happening, and it was getting harder and harder to ignore. I started to do some research and found out that the previous owner of the house had lost a baby and it had died in the garage. I knew then that I was hearing the ghost of that baby crying. I never told my wife or mother-in-law about my findings, but I always knew that the house was haunted by the ghost of that baby. From that day on, I never stayed in the house again. And I knew that the house was haunted by the ghost of that baby. To this day, I still have nightmares about that house and I still hear the baby crying in my head. It all began with my search for a new home for my family. I had always been interested in fixing up old houses and turning them into beautiful homes. So, when I came across a spacious fixer-upper that was within my budget, I knew it was the one. It was a 3-story Victorian with peeling paint, a leaky roof, and an overgrown garden. But I saw the potential in the old house and decided to take the plunge and buy it. However, soon after moving in, I discovered that the previous owner had drowned in the bathtub on the 2nd floor. The news hit me hard, and I couldn't believe that I had bought a house with such a tragic history. But I decided to push it to the back of my mind and focus on the renovations. The work on the house was grueling, and I put in long hours every day. But at night, when I lay down to sleep, I would hear water leaking from the bathtub. I would go to investigate, but there was never anything there. I thought maybe it was just my imagination, and I tried to ignore it. But the noise continued, night after night. One night, I woke up to the sound of running water coming from the bathroom. I got up to investigate, and as I opened the door, I saw the bathtub filled with water. But there was no one there. I froze in fear, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, the water started to overflow and spilled out onto the floor. From that night on, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I would see shadows moving in the corners of my eyes and feel a cold draft in the house. I tried to ignore it, but it only got worse. I started to see the ghostly figure of a woman in the bathroom. It might be the previous owner, the one who drowned in the bathtub. I feel like she was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I couldn't take it anymore, and I knew I had to get out of that house. I talked to a psychic, who confirmed that the ghost was stuck in the house and could not move on until her death was avenged. I felt a sense of responsibility towards the woman and decided to investigate the cause of her death. After digging through the records, I found out that the woman had been murdered by her husband, who had drowned her in the bathtub. I sold the house and moved on, leaving the ghost of the woman behind. But I'll never forget the fear and unease I felt living in that haunted house. It will always be with me as a reminder of the tragic past that had haunted the house and the woman who had lost her life there. The house on the hill was an old, dilapidated mansion that had been abandoned for years. It was said to be haunted by the ghost of a woman who had died in the house, her spirit trapped in the home forever, searching for her lost love. But I never believed it until I saw it with my own eyes. I had heard stories of the ghost, but I never thought it was true. My friends and I decided to explore the abandoned house on a dark, stormy night. As we approached the house, the wind howled and the rain battered against the windows. The house looked eerie, with broken windows and overgrown weeds surrounding it. We all felt a sense of fear, but we pushed on, eager to see if the ghost stories were true. As soon as we entered the house, we were greeted with a chill that ran down our spines. The house was dark and silent, and we could feel the ghostly presence all around us. The air felt thick and heavy, and we could hear strange noises coming from the shadows. We made our way through the house, and it was clear that it had been abandoned for a long time. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. Furniture was overturned, and the wallpaper was peeling off the walls. But as we entered the living room, we saw something that made our blood run cold. There, in front of us, stood a ghostly figure. It was a woman dressed in a white gown. Her eyes were dark and hollow, and her hair was wild and unkempt. She stood there, staring at us with a blank expression on her face. We could feel her sorrow and pain. We could see the tears streaming down her face and knew that she was still searching for her lost love. We were all paralyzed with fear, and we couldn't move. We could only stand there, staring at the ghost. She seemed to be getting closer and closer to us, and we could feel her cold breath on our faces. We could see the ghostly figure reaching out to us, as if she was trying to tell us something. We were rooted to the spot, too scared to move. But just as she was about to reach us, she suddenly vanished. We were all left standing there, shaking and trembling. We knew that we had been in the presence of a very haunted ghost, and we were grateful to be alive. We quickly left the house, and as we walked away, we could still feel her presence following us. We never spoke of our experience again, but the memory of that night stayed with us forever. We all knew that the ghost was still there, waiting for her next victim, and that the house on the hill would always be haunted. The ghost spirit was trapped there forever, searching for her lost love, and we couldn't help but feel a sense of sorrow for her.